Hey, well, after my last video on the history of tech tricks, some of you had said that you really wanted some more of these kind of videos, and it's fun to do this history, mainly because I want it to be cataloged somewhere, because it's just not. So to have these videos recorded, and the more I've looked back on some of the history and websites and things that existed, they're just not online anywhere. So I do think it's important to have some of this history recorded somewhere, even if just for my own kids or grandkids someday. But I want to talk a little bit about Team M.A, the Team Massachusetts, and when we started, where we came from, because out of Team M.A came a lot of yo-yoers. That was a group that I was a part of. Nate Sutter, Alex Loziniak, Nate Auger. We were kind of the core four people at that time. Then after that came Boulay and Eric Kolaski and a lot of the people that you all know pretty well. And so let me just talk a little bit kind of about where that started and what my story is there. Now, I started yo-yoing at 10 years old. It was 1997. It was my 5th grade year. So it was the end of 1997 that yo-yoing started to get really big. And I know 98, 99 are kind of the big years for yo-yoing, for the big yo-yo boom. So it was in late 97. I got a yo-yo. It was just a Duncan Butterfly, and everybody had them at the time. And I was invited by Nate Sutter, who he had heard about some kind of new yo-yo school that was going on, and some of these classes that you could take to learn more about yo-yoing. And so this was at A to Z Science and Learning Store in Northampton, Massachusetts. That's what the store that Boulay now owns. It was owned by Jack Finn at the time. And I was like, oh, that sounds kind of fun. I had been terrible at sports, and I looked for other activities to do, to find community, because it just, sports weren't my thing, and I was always terrible at them. So then we went together. We went to this store. This was brand new. It was like a Saturday yo-yo class. We were there for the very first class. His father, I think, had gone to the A to Z store and heard about this or something. They were handing out flyers. And so basically what this was Yomega Yo-Yos, which was based in Fall River, Massachusetts, which was, in another part of the state, closer to the Providence, Rhode Island area. And we were in Western Mass in the Northampton area. But we had, they had set up a series of these schools where they would go to different stores and set up schools that they would try to have these yo-yo training centers. And it was supposed to be some kind of a national thing. I don't think it went very broadly at all. I don't even know if it really went much beyond Massachusetts. I believe Delaware had one, if I can remember correctly, but there weren't very many of these. But when yo-yos were getting popular, it was a thing to get people interested in yo-yoing and in the product that Yomega was selling. So they would set up these schools. What they would basically do, they'd get a teacher there, and they'd have a list of tricks, and you had to complete this list of tricks. And once you completed everything on this list, you would then join Team Yomega. And there was a special Team Yomega. It was like a Raider. I still have one. I have it somewhere. I think it's at my parents' house. But you get this yo-yo that says you're now welcome on Team Yomega. And that trick list, looking at it today, looks a little bit odd because there were no unresponsive yo-yos at the time. So it's a mix of single A, double A. You'd have to do loops and shoot the moon. Two-handed loops was the final trick, and that was the most difficult trick. So once you went through this list, you'd be on Team Yomega. Then A to Z started a demonstration team. So you'd go around to schools and different places in the community and do these demonstrations. So Nate Sutter and I went together. We started at the same time. I completed the trick list first. So I was the first person on Team Yomega, at least from Northampton, from A to Z. Sean Fumo was right behind me. I actually think it may have been the same day that he finished his list. I think I just happened to finish it a little earlier in the day than he did. And basically, you'd get 2 tries for each of these tricks. And then if you didn't get it, you'd have to try the trick next time. So you had to be pretty well prepared before you actually had your attempt at doing the tricks. And then Nate Sutter joined the team pretty quickly after that. So it was around the same time. We were the first 3 people on the team. It was myself, Nate Sutter, Sean Fumo, and honestly, Sean Fumo came in much better than all of us, and he knew a lot more tricks than we did. We just happened to have started before him, so I got to get on the team before him. He was much better than I was at the time, for sure. But then, and the guy who had taught us was a guy named Jim. I can't even remember his last name, but he was my primary teacher at the time. And so that was in 98. And I remember the first time I saw something in yo-yoing that got me like really excited for the potentials in yo-yoing was a video of the 1998 Nationals with Sky Kiabu winning first place. We saw off-string, and it was the coolest thing that we had ever seen. He also did Iron Whip, which was just like, totally wild out there. It was an amazing trick. And I think that really inspired us to like move forward. Like this is what's really possible with the yo-yo. And I remember we would watch that freestyle on repeat. I mean, over and over and over again. And that was like on this VHS tape that you had to order. So before you could get videos online like you can now. And I actually remember the first clip videos that we watched. I remember waiting 3 hours on my dial-up modem to get a Spin Docks video. And I remember me and Nate Auger at the time, like just waiting by the computer. Like we were so excited to watch these new yo-yo videos. So that was how we got interested in yo-yoing. And then we started a kind of separate group of us that would get together regularly. Now, we were A to Z like every Saturday, just constantly hanging out. We had community with yo-yos. It was great. But even outside of that, it was myself, Nate Auger, Alex Loziniak, and then Nate Sutter as well. Nate Sutter was my neighbor, lived across the street. We would get together just constantly. I mean, we were together like always. They were always at my house, usually at my house. And we created our own like separate team, and we called it at the time Team Spinnerific. We were in 7th grade. All right. It's silly, but we were young, and we had these like shirts that we made up. And I do still have pictures of that, but we had shirts that we made up, and we wrote like Spinnerific on them, and everything. Everybody wore bowling shirts. That was like the thing at the time. This was the 90s after all. And every yo-yo had bowling shirts. So, we started filming videos on a camcorder, like on VHS, and nobody saw these videos. They weren't put online, and so I'm sure they're like very embarrassing. And I don't know, my parents may still have them somewhere. But those were mostly me and Alex Ziniak, and then Nate Auger. Now Nate Auger started probably a year after the rest of us did. Alex started, I think, just after Nate Sutter and I started. So, but it was all pretty close to the same time, and Team Spinnerific then eventually became what was known as Team M.A. And we had started in 2000. Somebody had introduced us, and I can't even tell you who introduced us. It was probably Jim, actually, to the Spin Doctors videos from the West Coast and the things that they were doing. And we had, again, I had a computer, which not everybody had a computer back then. We had this slow dial-up internet. We got these videos. It took hours and hours, and we would watch those Spin Docks videos over and over again. I mean, we memorized all of those tricks. I mean, we just went back and forth trying to figure out every single trick in all of those videos, which then really became the foundation for all of us in creating our own tricks. So a lot of credit goes to those Spin Docks guys. I mean, they were doing things that were amazing far before anybody else was. And I remember us meeting up with there was a group of yo-yoers from Fall River that were the actual official Team Yomega. Matt Rose, he was on that McDonald's commercial, and he was kind of the speed guy, I remember back then. But they were like, I remember them coming to us, and they were always the guys that we looked up to because they were Yomega started there, right? So they started all before us. But I remember them being like amazed when we showed them like that we could do White Buddha, and they hadn't even seen the Spin Docks videos yet. And then we showed them, and but it was a fun kind of cross pollination of these different like little clusters of groups teaching one another. Those guys with AA were way better than all of us were. I always stunk at AA, honestly. So then when we decided, like, well, why don't we start to do something like what the Spin Docks do? And it was 2000 that they started those videos. And we said, look, we're creating all sorts of tricks too. And we had been competing for a little while. My first contest was in 99. So 99, 2000, I competed quite a bit. So in 2001, I said, why don't we start recording our like our meetings, monthly meetings. Once a month, we'll get our tricks together. We'll film some stuff. The first one we did was in January of 2001. It's a terrible video. I mean, like, my tricks were awful in the video. The recording quality is terrible. It's like in Nate Auger's dark basement. But it was me, Nate Sutter, Nate Auger, Alex Loziniak, and Andre Boulay. So I think that's definitely the first recording of Andre. He was brand new at Yo-Yoing at the time, and we were teaching him. As wild as that is probably for many of you who, like, Andre was your teacher, we were teaching Andre these tricks, and he picked up stuff like, honestly, way quicker than any of us did. He like caught up to everybody like really, really fast. He had a natural talent pretty early on. We were teaching Eric Kolaski as well. And those guys, went on to do some really, obviously, really important stuff for the yo-yoing community. But January, we started that video. I sent it to, at the time, it was hard to get videos online. Like, there was no YouTube. So you had to have somebody that would host it. It was expensive to host, big video files. So the first video in January of that year, I sent to Citadel, he was the guy who ran the Sector Y website, and they were the ones that put up the Spin Docs videos. And I said, hey, we're a team from Massachusetts. We're doing a lot of we're trying to do the same kind of stuff you guys are doing. We're interested we want to know if you'd be interested in hosting our videos. They were really the inspiration for our videos. He watched the January video, which again was terribly recorded, and like, we got bad takes of all of our tricks, and it wasn't good. You can still watch it on YouTube. It's up now. But anyway, he said he very nicely was like, yeah, why don't you guys give it another go? And he saw that we had potential to make some good videos. We just like didn't know what the heck we were doing at the time. And so he gave me some tips, and maybe you should use some like better music and better lighting and other things. So I said, okay, let's try again. So he said, why don't you send me one next month when you guys put a video together? So I put the video together in February. He's like, this is good. Put it up. From then on, the rest of it was February through June that year. We had released a bunch of videos. In June, we recorded 3 separate videos. And Mark Montgomery was in that one as well. Mark Montgomery was also kind of part of that Team M.A. crew. He didn't live in Western Mass, but he came to visit us all the time. So we would do stuff together, and we were always doing contests and showing each other tricks and stuff. So when I think of Team M.A., people, probably the 4 of us were kind of the core of the ones that were together all the time. But I do think of Mark Montgomery and Andre Boulay certainly as part of that group. And so for the rest of that year, we created these videos, and then that's kind of how we got how we had some influence. So looking back at the videos that we had recorded, and recently I've just been doing this kind of look back at my stuff, just because I'm starting this kind of project talking about some of this history. And as I've gone back and watched that and watched some of the other things from that time, some of the stuff that we did was pretty innovative. Like I am more impressed, I think, looking back with the kinds of things that were happening that I was aware of at the time. And not trying to like brag about myself per se, but it was just an exciting time when you had this group of people. We were all we just hit it at the right time, right? At the time where yo-yos were changing and shifting so fast, tricks are being created so fast. And we just spent a lot of time together, and we had the freedom to be able to be creative together and teach each other things. So a lot of the tricks that and moves that become pretty like standard in yo-yoing did come from our group to different ones of us, and I think we each had our own kind of strengths and weaknesses. Probably the most well known is plastic whip. I can show you that here. That was a trick that Nate Sutter created. Now, Nate Sutter was always the kind of thinking out of the box guy. Like, he was the guy who he wouldn't just create tricks while he was in the middle of doing something. Like, he wouldn't try things out. He'd be like, oh, hey, I've got an idea. What if you just did like an iron whip, but just kind of popped the yo-yo up, grabbed the string, and whipped it? And then he did it. Like, he created some tricks that people still do that he didn't even do himself. I remember particularly his variation of boing boing, or boingy boing, I guess as most people say. We always said boing boing. But his variation, which then became like a standard for preliminaries when those were still a thing, he created before he even knew boing boing. I remember he was hanging out we were hanging out at my parents' house, and Alex was doing boing boing. He's like, why did you do this thing? And he just did it. Like Nate always had these kind of crazy ideas, and they ended up working, you know. Alex was the guy who had the smoothest style and combos. Mark Montgomery was like that too. You know, those guys were very, very smooth and both have a very unique style. Alex, I don't think, has been yo-yoing for a long time at this point. And then I was always like the tech guy. I do want to tell some stories too about my experiences in yo-yo contests and talk about why I stopped competing. And I think that some of the new yo-yoers especially will find those stories interesting because the things that I didn't do well on in competitions, people were critical of the fact that I used binds to return my yo-yo, and I got points taken off for my tricks being too complicated, which is funny now looking back. But people weren't doing that, and the things I was doing were seen as odd, I guess. So yeah, that was Team M.A. That's how we started. You know, from that point forward, it was really only then that we had all those team videos. But you know, 2001, 2002, 2003, we were doing tons of contests. We were just going, you know, all over the place. Northeast regionals, Mid-Atlantic regionals, and yeah, I'd be happy to talk some about some of the tricks that were innovated at that time, some of the things that started. It looks like we actually were. I recently watched Doc Pop's video about binds and the history of binds. We were doing binds in contests, and I don't know where. To be honest, I have no idea where we learned the binds. I really don't remember. I was thinking maybe it was from the other Team Yomega guys, but I don't actually know if that's true. I don't know where we got it from, but I know that by the end of 2000s, we were doing binds in contests regularly. We couldn't do the tricks we were doing without them. And I know that we have videos of, if I wish we still had them, of MAR in 2000. But that was kind of the end of our team videos. It was really just that year that we did those videos. I ended up kind of doing a lot of my own stuff at that point. And some of that is just we all developed our own styles, and we, you know, got older and we're kind of doing our own things. Nate Auger and I still get together regularly, and he still throws some, but yeah, you know, Alex and I haven't talked in years, and Nate Sutter and I haven't talked in years, but and then really the people who were probably the most lasting in the yo-yo community ended up being Auger, Boulay, and then Eric Kolaski. And Eric was kind of we've got him in one of our videos. I'll show you this video of Eric as a little kid to see how old he was when we were teaching him. But they were the ones who probably had the most kind of staying power within the yo-yoing community. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this kind of fun look back in time, and just trying to catalog some of this history of yo-yoing, as it's not really, you know, available a lot of places. It's not like people have published all these books on the history of yo-yoing for that time. So anyway, for what it's worth, there's the video. So make sure you subscribe if you're interested in this kind of stuff. And I want to continue doing this series for a little while, and we'll see you next time.